Welcome to History's Darkest Questions. Today's video is Religious Life and Repression Within the Gulag System. Imagine being torn from your family, stripped of all freedom, and thrown into a desolate, freezing camp simply for practicing your faith. This was the reality for countless individuals under the Soviet Gulag system, a network of labor camps that turned the notion of religious life into a desperate struggle for survival. The Gulag, an acronym for the Russian term Glavnoye Upravlenie Lagerai, meaning main camp administration, was a system of forced labor camps operating from the 1930s to the 1950s. It wasn't merely a system of imprisonment, it was a horrific engine of repression. For those who held religious beliefs, whether Christian, Muslim, Jewish, or other, the Gulag was a crucible of suffering, unlike any other. Arrests often began with a midnight knock on the door. Secret police would ransack homes, confiscating religious texts and icons, while men and women were bound and hauled away to face a mock trial. Accused of being enemies of the people, they were often sentenced without evidence. The offense? Simply being a cleric or a devout believer. This brutal system aimed to crush the human spirit by making faith itself a crime. Inside the camps, the conditions were beyond harrowing. Prisoners were forced into back-breaking labor, from mining to logging, in sub-zero temperatures with scant clothing or food. Death from starvation, exposure, and exhaustion was common. But for those with religious convictions, the torment reached even greater depths. Guards went out of their way to mock and humiliate religious prisoners. Orthodox priests were made to clean latrines with their robes. Muslim inmates endured the desecration of their holy texts. For the devout, every day was an endless cycle of degradation and agony. Yet, faith persisted in the darkest corners of the Gulag. Miraculously, clandestine religious services were held despite the severe risks. Groups of prisoners, often from different faiths, would gather in secret, using makeshift materials for their ceremonies. Bread crusts were used as communion wafers, while tin cups served as chalices. These acts of defiance supplied a glimmer of hope and humanity amid an ocean of despair. But discovery by guards typically led to severe punishment, solitary confinement, or even execution. The psychological torture was relentless. Prisoners were coerced to betray their faith, to sign confessions denouncing their religious leaders and communities. Refusal often meant extreme punishment or death. Reports tell of individuals who maintained their faith until their last breath, becoming martyrs in the truest sense. These stories underscore a tragic but profound truth. The Gulag failed to obliterate the spiritual resilience of its prisoners. Children were not spared from the horrors. Often, the offspring of religious prisoners were branded as socially dangerous elements and taken to orphanages where they were indoctrinated against their parents' beliefs. Family bonds were severed, and children grew up believing in the state's propaganda, often unaware of their true heritage until much later. The Stalinist regime viewed religion as a source of subversion, a rival loyalty to its totalitarian ideals. The state promoted a twisted version of secularism, insisting on atheism and deifying the Soviet ideology as the ultimate truth. For those inside the Gulag, this was an insidious war on their identity. Beyond the barbed wire fences and watchtowers lay a campaign to erase the very essence of human belief and spirit. Internationally, the plight of religious prisoners in the Gulag gained attention. Smuggled testimonies from survivors and letters clandestinely sent by inmates provided a glimpse into the atrocities. These accounts spurred global outcry and pressure on the Soviet government, although significant change was slow to materialize. The world began to see the Soviet regime not as a workers' paradise, but as a place of unparalleled cruelty. Even after Stalin's death in 1953 and the subsequent de-Stalinization policies, the scars of the Gulag system remained. Survivors who managed to leave often found themselves shunned by society, living with the trauma and stigma of having been prisoners. Their stories, however, refused to be silenced. Memoirs and testimonials began surfacing, documenting the intense persecution of religious life in the Gulag. These personal histories have been invaluable in understanding the true nature of repression and resilience within those camps. Today, the legacy of the Gulag serves as a cautionary tale. Memorials and museums across the former Soviet territories and worldwide pay tribute to the millions who suffered and died. The narratives of religious persecution offer stark reminders of the human cost of ideological extremism and the unbreakable strength of faith in the face of unspeakable evil. In summary, the Gulag system was not just a network of labor camps, but a methodical machine designed to eradicate religious life in Soviet Russia. Despite the overwhelming brutality, countless individuals held fast to their faith, often paying the ultimate price. They stand as enduring symbols of the human spirit, unable to be crushed by even the most oppressive regimes and conditions imaginable.